The morning sun streamed through the cracked windows of Sunshine Elementary as Emma Chen arranged colorful picture books on tiny wooden desks. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor as she moved between the chairs, placing each book with care. The classroom smelled of crayons and hope, two things that had kept her going through the toughest times. At 26, Emma had the kind of warm smile that made children feel safe and dreams feel possible. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes came from discount stores, but she carried herself with a dignity that money couldn't buy. The children adored her, calling her Miss Emma with voices full of joy, but behind her bright eyes lay a heavy burden. Her father's gambling addiction had left the family drowning in debt. The collectors called every day, their voices sharp and demanding. Emma worked 2 jobs, teaching during the day and tutoring at night, just to keep the lights on in their small apartment. Her biggest dream wasn't wealth or fame. She wanted something much simpler and infinitely more precious. Emma longed to be a mother, to give a child the love and stability she had always craved. She had applied to adopt through the county agency, but her financial situation made approval nearly impossible. The conference that changed everything. The annual Education Innovation Summit was held at the Grand Metropole Hotel, a gleaming tower of glass and marble that seemed to touch the clouds. Emma had received a free ticket through a teacher's lottery, and she decided to attend despite feeling completely out of place among the wealthy donors and corporate sponsors. The main ballroom buzzed with conversations about million-dollar grants and revolutionary learning technologies. Emma sat in the back row wearing her best dress, which was a simple navy blue outfit she had owned for 3 years. She munched on complimentary cookies and took notes, hoping to find ideas she could use in her classroom. The keynote speaker was Sebastian Hawthorne, founder and CEO of Hawthorne Technologies. At 32, he had built an empire worth billions, creating educational software used in schools worldwide. He stood at the podium with perfect posture, his dark suit tailored to perfection, speaking in measured tones about the future of learning. Sebastian had sharp features and steel-gray eyes that seemed to calculate everything they saw. His black hair was styled precisely, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never known failure. To most people, he appeared to have everything, but Emma noticed something others missed. Behind his polished exterior, there was a loneliness that reminded her of the shy children in her classroom. The question that started. It all during the question and answer session, the moderator asked if any teachers wanted to share their perspectives. Emma's hand shot up before she could stop herself. The room fell silent as she stood, her heart pounding like a drum. "Thank you for your generous donations to education," Emma began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But I wonder if we're treating symptoms instead of the disease. These scholarships and grants are wonderful, but they create a system where children must prove they deserve help instead of receiving it simply because they're human beings who want to learn." The ballroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Several board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The moderator cleared her throat nervously. Emma continued, "What if instead of charity, we focused on justice? What if every child had access to quality education regardless of their parents' bank account or ZP code?" Sebastian's eyes locked onto hers from across the room. Unlike the others, he didn't look offended or dismissive. Instead, his expression showed something unexpected, genuine curiosity. For the first time in years, someone had challenged him in a way that made him think rather than defend. An unlikely investigation. That night, Sebastian sat in his penthouse office, the city lights twinkling below like fallen stars. He couldn't focus on the quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk. The teacher's words echoed in his mind, but more than that, her passion had stirred something in his carefully controlled world. He called his assistant, James Parker, an efficient man in his 40s who had worked for Sebastian for 8 years. "I need you to research someone," Sebastian said, his voice betraying none of the turmoil he felt inside. Within 24 hours, James provided a complete report. Emma Chen, kindergarten teacher at Sunshine Elementary. Father deceased from complications related to gambling addiction. Mother remarried and moved across the country, living alone in a one-bedroom apartment, working multiple jobs to pay off inherited debts totaling $68,000. The report also revealed Emma's application to adopt a child, rejected due to financial instability despite glowing. Character references. Sebastian read every word twice, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. He had grown up in a world of privilege, attending the finest schools and wanting for nothing material. But his childhood had been cold and calculating, filled with nannies and boarding schools while his parents built their own business empire. He had learned early that emotions were weaknesses to be controlled or eliminated. Yet this teacher, this woman who had so little, wanted to give everything to a child who needed love. The contrast to his own upbringing was stark and unsettling. The business proposal Sebastian didn't believe in coincidences, but he created one. He arranged to visit Sunshine Elementary under the pretense of evaluating his company's educational software donations. The school was a far cry from his world of glass towers and designer everything. The hallways smelled of cafeteria food and floor wax. Children's artwork covered every available wall space, bright and messy and full of life. He found Emma's classroom and watched through the small window in the door. She was reading to a circle of 6-year-olds, her voice animated as she brought the story to life. The children hung on every word, their faces bright with wonder. When one little boy started to cry because he missed his grandmother, Emma knelt beside him and whispered something that made him smile. Sebastian felt something crack inside his carefully constructed walls. This woman possessed something he had never learned, the ability to make others feel valued and loved simply by being herself. He waited until the children left for lunch before approaching her classroom. Emma looked up from her desk where she was grading papers with a pen that was running out of ink. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, standing up and smoothing her simple skirt. "I wasn't expecting you." "I have a proposition for you," Sebastian said, cutting straight to the point as he always did in business. "I need a wife for 1 year to satisfy the terms of an inheritance clause. You need money to pay off your debts and qualify for adoption. We can help each other." Emma blinked, certain she had misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "It's a business arrangement," Sebastian continued, his voice as steady as if he were discussing stock prices. "I'll pay off your debts, provide you with a stable income, and ensure your adoption application is approved. In return, you'll attend social functions as my wife and maintain the appearance of a stable marriage for 12 months. Emma sat down, heavily in her desk chair, staring at him as if he had grown a second head. "Are you seriously proposing a fake marriage?" "I'm proposing a mutually beneficial contract," Sebastian corrected. "You get the financial stability you need to adopt a child. I get the family image required by my grandmother's will." For a long moment, Emma said nothing. Then she started to laugh, a sound so unexpected and genuine that Sebastian felt his carefully composed expression falter. "This is insane," Emma said, wiping tears from her eyes. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Sebastian replied. "You're honest, dedicated, and you want to help a child. Those are the qualities I need in a partner for this arrangement." Emma studied his face, looking for any sign that this was an elaborate joke. But Sebastian's gray eyes were serious, almost vulnerable in a way that made her heart skip. "What makes you think I'd agree to something like this?" she asked. "Because," Sebastian said quietly, "we both have something the other needs. And sometimes, the most logical solution is also the most unexpected one." The decision that changed everything. That evening, Emma sat in her tiny kitchen staring at the stack of bills on her table. The red final notice stamps seemed to glow in the dim light of her single overhead bulb. Her phone buzzed with another call from a debt collector, but she let it go to voicemail. She thought about Sebastian's proposal, so clinical and businesslike. It should have offended her, this reduction of marriage to a contract. But beneath, His polished exterior, she had glimpsed something that made her pause. He wasn't just a cold businessman making a calculated move. He was a man who had everything money could buy, but seemed to possess nothing that truly mattered. Emma picked up her phone and scrolled through the photos on her camera. Pictures of her students, their gap-toothed grins and paint-covered hands. These children filled her days with purpose, but every night she went home to an empty apartment and wondered if she would ever have a family of her own. The adoption rejection letter lay folded in her bedside drawer, read so many times the creases had become soft. Insufficient financial stability were the words that haunted her dreams. Her best friend Grace Miller called just as Emma was heating up a cup of instant noodles for dinner. "You look terrible," Grace said the moment Emma answered the video call. "What's wrong now?" Emma found herself telling Grace everything, from the conference confrontation to Sebastian's shocking proposal. Grace listened without interruption, her eyes growing wider with each revelation. "He wants to marry you for business?" Grace finally said. "Emma, this sounds like the plot of a romance novel." "It's not romantic," Emma protested. "It's purely transactional." "Honey," Grace said gently, "rich men don't propose fake marriages to random teachers unless there's more to it. What aren't you telling me?" Emma hesitated, then admitted, "When he looked at me today, it didn't feel like business. It felt like he was seeing something in me that even I don't understand." "Maybe this is your chance," Grace said. "Not just for the money, but for something more. When was the last time someone wanted to take care of you instead of the other way around?" After Grace hung up, Emma sat in the silence of her apartment. Outside her window, she could see families in the neighboring building eating dinner together, children laughing and playing. The longing in her chest was so sharp it took her breath away. She picked up her phone and typed a message to Sebastian. "I accept your proposal, but I have conditions of my own." His response came within minutes. "Name them." Emma smiled despite herself. Whatever happened next, her life would never be the same. The morning Emma moved into Sebastian's penthouse felt like stepping into a different universe. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor seemed to last forever, her single suitcase looking pathetic next to the gleaming marble and gold fixtures. She had spent her entire life in spaces where every inch mattered, and now she was entering a home that could fit 10 of her old apartments. Sebastian waited for her in the foyer, dressed in a crisp white shirt and dark slacks that probably cost more than Emma made in a month. The space around him was all clean lines and expensive art, everything perfectly arranged like a museum display. "Welcome to your new home," he said, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "James will show you to your room," Emma nodded, trying not to gawk at the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. "This is temporary," she reminded herself quietly. "Just 1 year." Her bedroom was larger than her entire previous apartment, complete, with a walk-in closet and bathroom that looked like something from a luxury hotel. On the bed lay a thick folder labeled Marriage Contract, Terms and Conditions. Emma flipped through the pages, shaking her head at the detailed clauses covering everything from public appearances to social media guidelines. But tucked between the legal language was something unexpected, a separate document authorizing the immediate payment of all her debts and establishing a trust fund for her future adopted child's education. He had done this before she even moved in, before she could change her mind. The gesture was both generous and controlling, typical of the complicated man she had agreed to marry. Learning the rules, their first week together felt like an elaborate dance where neither knew the steps. Sebastian left for work before Emma woke up and returned long after she had gone to bed. They communicated through notes left on the kitchen counter, polite and distant like strangers sharing a hotel suite. But Emma began to notice small things that suggested Sebastian was more aware of her presence than he let on. The coffee maker was programmed to brew her favorite blend at exactly 7 a.m. The refrigerator was stocked with foods she mentioned liking during their brief conversations. Fresh flowers appeared in her room every few days, always simple daisies that reminded her of her classroom. Emma had agreed to quit her teaching job to maintain the appearance of being a wealthy man's wife, but Sebastian surprised her by suggesting she volunteer at a local children's center instead. It would look good for the adoption application, he said matter-of-factly, but Emma caught something softer in his expression. The children's center was in a rough part of town, serving families who couldn't afford private daycare. Emma threw herself into the work, organizing art projects and reading circles, slowly building relationships with kids who had learned not to trust adults easily. One afternoon, she was helping a shy 7-year-old named Tommy with his reading, when she looked up to see Sebastian standing in the doorway. He wore an expensive suit that looked completely out of place among the donated furniture and crayon-covered tables. "What are you doing here?" Emma asked, surprised. "I thought I should see where my wife volunteers," Sebastian replied, but his eyes were focused on Tommy, who was proudly showing off the book he had just finished reading. "This is Mr. Sebastian," Emma told Tommy. "He helps make the computer. Programs you use in school." Tommy's eyes went wide. "You make video games?" For the first time since Emma had known him, Sebastian smiled genuinely. "Sometimes. What kind of games do you like?" As Tommy launched into an enthusiastic description of his favorite racing game, Emma watched Sebastian's face transform. The cold businessman facade melted away, revealing someone who remembered what it felt like to be excited about simple things. Meeting the family, Sebastian's mother, Catherine Hawthorne, was exactly what Emma had expected. Elegant, intimidating, and clearly displeased with her son's choice of bride. She arrived at the penthouse unannounced on a Thursday evening, sweeping through the door in a cloud of expensive perfume and disapproval. "So you're the teacher," Catherine said, looking Emma up and down like she was evaluating a questionable piece of art. How quaint. Emma had faced difficult parents before in her teaching career, but Catherine's icy politeness was on another level entirely. They sat in the formal living room, sipping tea from china cups that probably cost more than Emma's monthly salary. "I suppose Sebastian told you about the inheritance conditions," Catherine continued. "My mother-in-law had very specific ideas about family stability. She believed a man wasn't truly successful unless he had a wife and children." "It's an arranged marriage," Emma said quietly. "We both understand what this is." Catherine's laugh was sharp. "Oh, my dear girl, you have no idea what you've gotten yourself into. Sebastian doesn't do anything without calculating every possible outcome. If he chose you, it's because you serve a purpose beyond satisfying legal requirements." After Catherine left, Emma found Sebastian in his home office, staring out at the city lights with a glass of untouched wine in his hand. "Your mother doesn't approve of me," Emma said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "My mother doesn't approve of anyone," Sebastian replied without turning around. "She thinks emotions are signs of weakness." "What do you think?" Emma asked. Sebastian was quiet for so long that Emma thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said, "I used to think she was right. Emotions complicate things, make people unpredictable, but lately, I'm not so sure." Emma felt something shift between them, a crack in the wall Sebastian kept around his heart. "What changed your mind?" Sebastian turned to look at her, his gray eyes unreadable. "You did. The adoption interview. Their appointment with Mrs. Rodriguez at the adoption agency was scheduled for a Tuesday morning." Emma had been nervous for days, rehearsing answers to potential questions and worrying that their fake marriage would be exposed. Sebastian surprised her by taking the morning off work, something James mentioned he hadn't done in 3 years. He wore a more casual outfit than usual, dark jeans and a sweater that made him look younger and more approachable. "Ready?" he asked as they sat in the parking lot outside the agency building. Emma nodded, though her hands were shaking slightly. Sebastian reached over and took her hand, his fingers warm and steady. "Hey," he said softly. "We've got this. You're going to be an amazing mother." The confidence in his voice surprised Emma. This wasn't part of their business arrangement, yet he seemed to genuinely believe in her ability to parent a child. Mrs. Rodriguez was a kind woman in her 50s, with graying hair and a warm smile. Her office was filled with photos of successful adoptions, families who had found each other through her guidance. "Tell me about your relationship," Mrs. Rodriguez began. "How did you two meet?" Emma started to give their rehearsed answer, but Sebastian interrupted. "She called me out in front of 500 people for being an arrogant rich guy who didn't understand real problems." Emma stared at him, this deviation from their script making her heart race. Sebastian continued, "I couldn't stop thinking about her after that. She had this way of cutting through all the nonsense and getting to the truth of things. Still does." "And what attracted you to Sebastian?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked Emma. Emma looked at her fake husband, seeing past the expensive clothes and perfect posture to the man who left her flowers and learned children's names and worried about whether she was happy. "He makes me feel safe," Emma said, the words coming out more honestly than she intended. "Not because of his money, but because when he commits to something, he follows through. I know that any child we adopt will have his complete protection and support." Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, making notes in her file. "Have you discussed what kind of child you'd like to adopt?" "Actually," Sebastian said, "we've been volunteering at a children's center and there's a little girl there who needs a family." Emma turned to him in surprise. They had never discussed adopting Sophie, a 6-year-old who had been in foster care for 3 years after her grandmother could no longer care for her. "Sophie Martinez," Sebastian continued. "She's incredibly bright, but struggles in school, because she's changed placements so many times. Emma has been working with her, and they formed a real connection." Mrs. Rodriguez's expression brightened. "I know Sophie's case well. She's a wonderful child who deserves a stable, loving home. The fact that you're already building a relationship with her speaks very well of your commitment." As they left the agency, Emma felt dizzy with possibility and confusion. "Why did you mention Sophie?" she asked as they walked to Sebastian's car. Sebastian stopped walking and turned to face her. "Because I've seen you with her. The way her face lights up when you walk into the room, the way you remember every story she tells you. She needs you, Emma. And I think you need her too." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "This wasn't supposed to be real," she whispered. "Maybe not," Sebastian said, his voice gentle. "But maybe the best things happen when we stop planning and start feeling." Cracks. In the foundation as weeks passed, the lines between their fake marriage and real emotions became increasingly blurred. Sebastian began coming home earlier, often finding excuses to spend time in whatever room Emma occupied. They developed routines, morning coffee together, evening walks around the building's rooftop garden, late-night conversations about their days. Emma caught Sebastian playing video games with Tommy during one of their visits to the children's center, the Billionaire CEO sitting cross-legged on the floor and laughing at the boys' commentary. Later, she found him reading to a group of younger children, his deep voice making the story come alive. "You're good with them," Emma said as they drove home that evening. "They're honest," Sebastian replied. "No ulterior motives, no hidden agendas, just pure reactions to the world around them." "Is that why you chose me?" Emma asked. "Because you thought I was honest?" Sebastian was quiet for several blocks. "I chose you because you made me remember what it felt like to care about something, beyond profit margins and stock prices." That night, Emma lay in her luxurious bed staring at the ceiling. Every day with Sebastian revealed new layers to his carefully constructed personality. The cold businessman was still there, but underneath was someone who had learned to hide his emotions so well that he had almost forgotten how to feel them. She was falling for him, and that wasn't part of their contract. The unexpected visitor. Their carefully maintained routine was disrupted when Michael Torres, Sebastian's business rival, showed up at the penthouse unannounced. Michael was everything Sebastian wasn't: charming, warm, and immediately friendly to Emma. "So you're the famous teacher who tamed the Ice King," Michael said with a grin that was probably meant to be charming but felt calculating to Emma. Sebastian's entire demeanor changed in Michael's presence, becoming colder and more formal. Emma watched the two men circle each other like predators, their conversation filled with subtle threats disguised as business talk. "I'm planning a charity gala next month," Michael announced, "supporting education initiatives. I'd love for you both to attend." After Michael left, Sebastian was tense and distant. "We're not going to his gala," he said flatly. "Why not?" Emma asked. "It sounds like it supports a good cause." "Michael Torres doesn't do anything for good causes," Sebastian replied. "He's trying to get close to you to undermine me." Emma felt a flash of anger. "Maybe not everything is about you and your business rivalries. Maybe some people actually care about helping children learn." Sebastian's expression hardened. "You don't understand how these people operate." "These people?" Emma repeated. "You mean your people. The wealthy, elite who treat everything like a game." "That's not fair," Sebastian said. "Isn't it?" Emma shot back. "Even our marriage is just another business transaction to you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to address. Sebastian's face went completely blank, his emotional walls slamming back into place. "You're right," he said coldly. "It is just business. I'll have James arrange for you to attend the gala with appropriate security. Consider it part of your contractual obligations." Emma watched him walk away, her heart breaking at how quickly he could shut down and retreat into his protective shell. She was falling in love with a man who had convinced himself he was incapable of love. Emma's world shifted completely during what should have been a routine doctor's appointment. She had been feeling tired and nauseous for weeks, assuming it was stress from navigating her complicated relationship with Sebastian. Dr. Lisa Park, her longtime physician, ran some tests and delivered news that changed everything. "Congratulations, Emma," Dr. Park said with a warm smile. "You're pregnant, about 8 weeks along." Emma stared at the ultrasound image in her hands, a tiny blob that would become her child. Their child. The night they had comforted each other, after visiting Sophie at the Children's Center, when their fake marriage had felt desperately real for a few precious hours. "This wasn't planned," Emma whispered, her voice shaking. "The best things rarely are," Dr. Park replied gently. "How do you feel about it?" Emma touched her still flat stomach, overwhelmed by a rush of protective love she had never experienced before. Terrified, happy, confused, all at the same time. Driving home to the penthouse, Emma's mind raced. Their contract had never mentioned the possibility of pregnancy. Sebastian had made it clear their arrangement was temporary and purely business. How would he react to news that would tie them together permanently? She found him in his home office, surrounded by financial reports, and speaking rapidly into his phone about quarterly projections. When he saw her, he held up one finger, indicating he needed another minute to finish his call. Emma sat in the chair across from his desk, the ultrasound image tucked safely in her purse, and watched the man who had become the center of her world without either of them planning it. Sebastian ended his call and looked at her with those piercing gray eyes that seemed to see everything. "You look pale," he said, his voice softer than the tone he used for business. "Are you feeling all right?" "We need to talk," Emma said, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sebastian's expression immediately became guarded. "If this is about the gala tomorrow night, I already told you that you don't have to go if you don't want to." "It's not about the gala," Emma said. She pulled out the ultrasound image and placed it on his desk between them. "It's about this." Sebastian stared at the image for a long moment, his face completely unreadable. Emma held her breath, waiting for his reaction, preparing herself for anger or rejection or cold calculation about how this would affect their business arrangement. "You're pregnant," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. 8 weeks, Emma confirmed. "I know. This wasn't part of our agreement. I know this complicates everything." Sebastian picked up the ultrasound image with hands that trembled slightly. "Our baby," he said, and something in his voice made Emma's eyes fill with tears. "Sebastian, Marry me," he interrupted, looking up at her with an intensity that took her breath away. Emma blinked in confusion. We're already married. Legally, anyway. No, Sebastian said, standing up and moving around the desk to kneel beside her chair. I mean, really marry me. Not for business or contracts or inheritance clauses. Marry me because I love you, and I want to build a real family with you. Emma stared at him, this powerful man kneeling beside her chair with tears in his eyes. You love me? I've been fighting it for months, Sebastian admitted, telling myself it was just part of the arrangement, that what I felt for you was convenient fiction. But Emma, you've changed everything. You've made me remember what it feels, like to hope for something beyond the next business deal. Emma cupped his face in her hands, seeing past all his walls to the vulnerable man underneath. I love you too. I've been terrified to admit it because I thought you saw me as just another contract to manage. Sebastian leaned into her touch. You're the most real thing in my life. You and this baby, you're everything I never knew I wanted. They held each other in the quiet of his office, the ultrasound image on the desk representing not just a pregnancy, but the promise of a future neither had dared to imagine. Building something real, the next few weeks transformed their relationship completely. Sebastian threw himself into preparing for fatherhood with the same intensity he brought to business deals, reading parenting books and researching everything from cribs to college funds. Emma watched with amusement and love as this man who commanded. Boardrooms worried about whether he was qualified to change a diaper. I've scheduled interviews with the top 3 pediatricians in the city, Sebastian announced over breakfast one morning, consulting a detailed spreadsheet on his tablet. Emma laughed, reaching across the table to take his hand. Sebastian, we have 7 months to find a doctor. Maybe we could start with enjoying being pregnant first? I want everything to be perfect for you and the baby, Sebastian said seriously. I want to make sure we're prepared for every possibility. The only thing I need is you, Emma said, bringing his hand to her lips. Not your money or your connections or your perfectly organized spreadsheets. Just you. Sebastian's expression softened. I'm not used to being enough just as I am. Well, get used to it, Emma said with a smile. Because you're going to be someone's daddy, and kids don't care about your net worth. They just want you to show up and love them. Their news about the pregnancy came at the perfect time for their adoption application. Mrs. Rodriguez was thrilled that Sophie would be joining a family that was growing, and the little girl was over the moon when they told her she would have a baby brother or sister. Can I help name the baby? Sophie asked during one of their visits to the children's center. Absolutely, Emma said, hugging the girl who would soon be her daughter. What names do you like? Sophie thought seriously for a moment. If it's a girl, maybe Luna, because that means moon, and moons are pretty. If it's a boy, maybe David, because that was my grandpa's name, and he was the best person ever. Sebastian, who had been quietly observing their interaction, knelt down to Sophie's level. Those are perfect names, Sophie. Would you like to help us decorate the nursery too? Sophie's face lit up with pure joy. Really? I can help make the baby's room. It's going to be your house too, Sebastian said gently. Everything we do together now. We're a family. Emma watched this exchange with tears in her eyes, seeing the man she loved embrace not just fatherhood, but the role of being Sophie's dad too. Their unconventional beginning was evolving into something beautiful and real. The challenge, their happiness was tested when Michael Torres made good on his implied threat. At his charity gala, which Emma and Sebastian ultimately decided to attend, Michael gave a speech that seemed designed to undermine Sebastian's reputation. It's wonderful to see successful businessmen like Sebastian Hawthorne discovering the importance of family, Michael said from the podium, his smile sharp. Though, I understand his marriage came together rather quickly. Sometimes the best partnerships are the most practical ones. Emma felt Sebastian tense beside her, his jaw clenched with anger. The implication was clear. Michael was suggesting their marriage was fake, a business arrangement rather than a love match. Let's go, Sebastian said quietly. No, Emma said, standing up. I have something to say. Before Sebastian could stop her, Emma walked to the front of the room. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on the schoolteacher who had dared to interrupt Michael Torres's speech. "My husband is right that our marriage happened quickly," Emma said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom. "Sometimes when you meet the person who makes you believe in love again, you don't waste time with long engagements." She looked directly at Sebastian, her love for him evident to everyone in the room. "Sebastian saw me as a person worth investing in before I saw it myself. He didn't just offer me financial security, he offered me a partnership built on respect and genuine care. That's not practical, that's miraculous." The crowd began to applaud, but Emma wasn't finished. "We're here tonight because we believe in supporting education for all children, not because we need to prove anything to anyone. Our family, including the daughter we're adopting and the baby we're expecting, is built on love, not contracts." Sebastian stood up, his face shining with pride and love. He joined Emma at the front of the room, taking her hand in front of everyone. "My wife is the smartest, most courageous person I know," Sebastian said. "She's taught me that the best investments aren't in stocks or real estate. They're in people, in relationships, in building something that lasts beyond quarterly reports." He looked at Michael, his expression calm but firm. "If you have questions about the authenticity of our marriage, Mr. Torres, I invite you to spend 5 minutes watching Emma with children and see if you think anyone could fake that kind of love. The perfect ending." 6 months later, Emma stood in the nursery of their new house, a sprawling home in the suburbs with a big backyard and space for children to play. She was 8 months pregnant, moving slowly but radiating happiness as she arranged baby clothes in the dresser. Sophie, now officially their daughter, burst through the door with paint-covered hands and a huge grin. "Mommy Emma, Daddy Sebastian says the playhouse is almost finished." Emma laughed, pulling Sophie close despite the paint. "Did you help him build it?" "I helped paint it yellow because that's a happy color," Sophie said proudly. "And I made sure it has windows so the baby can see outside when they get bigger." Sebastian appeared in the doorway, also covered in paint and looking more relaxed than Emma had ever seen him. He had taken a step back from day-to-day operations at his company, choosing to focus on his family instead of his next billion-dollar deal. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, kissing Emma's forehead and ruffling Sophie's hair. "Your son is doing soccer practice on my ribs," Emma said with a grimace as the baby kicked. "Could be a daughter doing karate," Sebastian replied, placing his hand on Emma's belly. "Either way, they're definitely going to be strong-willed like their mother. And hopefully kind like their father," Emma added, leaning into Sebastian's embrace. That evening, after Sophie was asleep and they were curled up together on the couch, Emma reflected on how much their lives had changed. What started as a business arrangement had become the greatest love story of her life. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked Sebastian. "Giving up some of your business focus for this domestic life?" Sebastian was quiet for a moment, his hand resting on her pregnant belly. "Emma, I spent 32 years accumulating wealth and power, thinking that would make me successful. But success isn't about how much money you have. It's about how much love you give and receive." He kissed the top of her head. "You and Sophie and this baby, you're my greatest achievement. Everything else is just details." 3 weeks later, Emma gave birth to a healthy baby boy they named David, honoring Sophie's grandfather. Sebastian cried when he held his son for the first time. This man who had once believed emotions were weaknesses, overwhelmed by love so powerful, it redefined his understanding of strength. Sophie was the perfect big sister, gentle and protective, and endlessly fascinated by her baby brother. The adoption paperwork had been finalized just before David's birth, making their family official in every way that mattered. As Emma watched Sebastian read bedtime stories to Sophie while baby David slept peacefully in his arms, she marveled at the unexpected journey that had brought them together. A fake marriage proposal had led to the most authentic love she had ever known. Their house was filled with laughter and chaos, and the kind of noise that comes from a family that chooses each other every day. Sebastian's business continued to thrive, But he had learned to balance success with happiness, ambition with presence. Sometimes the best deals weren't negotiated in boardrooms, but built in living rooms, one day at a time, with people who saw past your walls to the person you were meant to become. Emma Chen Hawthorne had gotten everything she ever wanted: a family to love, children to nurture, and a partner who valued her heart above all else. And Sebastian had discovered that the greatest fortune wasn't in his bank account, but in the arms of the woman who had taught him how to feel. Their love story began with a contract, but was written in moments of genuine connection, proving that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful endings. The end.